Welcome to the Network Plus Prepcast, your dedicated audio companion for mastering every objective on the CompTIA Network Plus certification exam. This series is produced by baremetalcyber.com. In episode 130 on Why Networks, we examine the legal and operational agreements that shape service delivery, protect confidential information, and define cooperation across teams and vendors. While technical skills are essential in network administration, professionals must also understand the agreements that govern how networks are supported, maintained, and accessed. These agreements ensure that all parties understand their roles and expectations. For Network Plus candidates, these terms appear often on the exam and are crucial for real-world collaboration and support. This episode focuses on three of the most common agreement types found in networking environments: non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, service-level agreements, or SLAs, and memorandums of understanding, or MOUs. These are not just legal terms. They are tools used every day to manage vendor relationships, enforce service targets, and coordinate projects. You'll need to know what each agreement covers, when it applies, and how it supports both security and operations. These distinctions are frequently tested on the exam and encountered in live network environments. A non-disclosure agreement, or NDA, is a formal contract used to protect confidential information from being shared outside authorized boundaries. NDAs are often signed by employees, contractors, or vendors who may be exposed to internal systems, credentials, or proprietary processes. The goal is to limit the sharing of sensitive data, whether deliberate or accidental. On the exam, you'll be expected to recognize when an NDA is needed and how it contributes to information security. In the field of IT and networking, NDAs are commonly used to protect information like network configurations, firewall rules, topology diagrams, and passwords. For example, a third-party vendor performing switch replacements may be granted access to internal documentation, but only under an NDA. This limits their ability to share what they've seen or learned with anyone outside the authorized scope. The exam may include questions where confidential configurations are involved and require you to choose the correct agreement to enforce non-disclosure. Key components of an NDA include the scope of protected information, the duration for which confidentiality must be maintained, and the remedies if the agreement is violated. The scope clearly defines what data, discussions, or documents are protected. The duration may extend beyond employment or contract termination. Remedies describe what happens in the event of a breach, typically involving legal action or penalties. For the exam, you'll need to identify which of these terms belong in an NDA and how they apply to common network scenarios. A service-level agreement, or SLA, is a contract that defines specific service expectations. These agreements are tied to measurable performance targets and are often included in procurement or vendor contracts. SLAs hold providers accountable for uptime, response time, and service quality. They also outline the conditions under which penalties may apply if standards are not met. On the exam, you'll likely encounter SLA scenarios involving internet service providers, managed services, or cloud platforms. Common elements found in SLAs include availability guarantees. For example, 5 nines uptime, which translates to 99.999% availability. They may also include response time commitments, such as severity 1 incidents will receive a response within 15 minutes, and resolution targets for different issue levels. Penalties may involve service credits or contract renegotiation. For the exam, you'll need to distinguish between uptime guarantees and support level expectations as defined in these agreements. SLAs are especially important in relationships with cloud providers and internet service providers. These agreements define when and how maintenance windows occur, how customers are notified of issues, and what level of technical support is available. SLAs also define support tiers, such as business hours only, 24/7 availability, or premium support. The certification exam may include questions asking which details are defined in an SLA and how those details affect network availability and support expectations. A Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, is a formal but typically non-binding agreement that outlines roles, responsibilities, and cooperation between parties. Unlike a contract, An MOU does not necessarily include legal penalties for noncompliance. Instead, it serves as a written acknowledgement of mutual goals, shared resources, or collaborative intent. On the exam, MOUs are often referenced in scenarios involving internal department cooperation or public sector projects. MOUs are often used between departments, agencies, or partner organizations that share infrastructure or work jointly on projects. For example, two departments within a university may sign an MOU to jointly manage and maintain shared network infrastructure, or a local government and an emergency services agency may agree to share bandwidth or data center resources during critical events. These documents formalize cooperation but do not have the enforcement power of contracts. The exam may ask when to use an MOU versus a more binding agreement. Understanding the difference between NDAs, SLAs, and MOS is key. NDAs protect confidential data from unauthorized sharing. SLAs define measurable service expectations and performance targets. MOS establish mutual understanding between organizations or teams, often in shared or temporary projects. All three serve different purposes but are essential to the governance of IT environments. On the exam, expect to match each agreement to its correct definition and use case. For more cyber content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Enforcement and accountability vary by agreement type. Service-level agreements are typically backed by measurable metrics such as uptime, latency, or response time, and include provisions for penalties or service credits if terms are not met. Non-disclosure agreements are legally binding, and violations can result in lawsuits, fines, or termination of access. Memorandums of understanding, while formal, rely more on mutual cooperation and good faith than legal force. On the exam, expect questions about which agreements carry legal weight, how compliance is verified, and what happens when terms are breached. Just like network configurations, agreements must be reviewed and maintained over time. As services evolve, technologies change, or business needs shift, the terms of NDAs, SLAs, and MOUs may need to be revised. For example, an updated SLA might include support for a new type of service or a tighter resolution window. Reviewing agreements ensures they stay aligned with current expectations and capabilities. The exam may include questions on agreement lifecycle management, especially in the context of vendor relationships or infrastructure upgrades. Agreements play a major role in vendor and outsourcing relationships. They help prevent misunderstandings by clearly stating who is responsible for what, when services will be delivered, and what standards must be met. A well-written SLA can prevent disputes and speed up resolution in the event of an issue. NDAs protect proprietary information when external providers need access to sensitive systems. MOUs help coordinate shared infrastructure when multiple parties are involved. The exam may include vendor scenarios where selecting or interpreting the right agreement type is key. These agreements also have legal and compliance implications. Some industry certifications or regulations require proof that data is protected, services are documented, and roles are clearly defined. NDAs help enforce data privacy, while SLAs can prove that critical services are meeting operational standards. MOS may show that cooperation exists between departments during audits or regulatory reviews. For the exam, be prepared to identify how these agreements support audit readiness and legal obligations in different network contexts. Where and how agreements are stored is part of maintaining operational readiness. Contracts, NDAs, and MOUs should be archived in centralized repositories accessible to authorized personnel. These documents may need to be referenced during incident investigations, vendor escalations, or legal reviews. Contract metadata, such as start dates, expiration dates, and responsible parties should also be tracked. On the exam, expect to see questions about documentation storage and who should have access to agreement records in a secure environment. From a test preparation standpoint, it's important to memorize definitions and components of each agreement type. You should be able to distinguish between a service-level agreement and a memorandum of understanding based on context, format, and enforceability. You'll also need to match agreement elements like uptime metrics, confidentiality clauses, or roles and responsibilities to the correct document type. These topics frequently appear in questions related to vendor management, service delivery, and compliance enforcement. Business agreements connect directly to IT operations. A service-level agreement may define help desk response times, escalation rules, and availability targets. A non-disclosure agreement helps protect sensitive data such as router configurations, topology diagrams, or passwords shared with contractors. A Memorandum of Understanding clarifies how two departments share responsibility for maintaining a shared data center. Understanding these links helps technicians and engineers understand how contracts influence their day-to-day responsibilities. The exam may include operations-based questions that require selecting the appropriate agreement. To summarize, business agreements like NDAs, SLAs, and MOUs are more than administrative documents. They are operational tools. They define expectations, protect information, and create frameworks for cooperation and accountability. Knowing how they differ, when they apply, and how they affect network and vendor relationships will help you manage support escalations, compliance, and project planning. These agreements are tested not just for their definitions, but for how they interact with IT functions. To conclude episode 138, remember that ND as protect information, SL as define service delivery, and MOUs support cooperation. Each agreement plays a specific role in guiding and documenting IT activities, whether managing external vendors, supporting internal departments, or documenting shared goals. These agreements are part of daily operations. For Network Plus candidates, mastering their purpose and structure will help you answer exam questions with confidence and navigate professional relationships with clarity. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Network Plus Prepcast, your trusted audio guide to the CompTIA Network Plus certification. This episode was produced by baremetalcyber.com. For more cybersecurity podcasts, books, and resources, visit baremetalcyber.com. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cybersecurity Plus podcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com. And before you take the test, make sure to check out the practice questions in the book Achieve CompTIA Security Plus SY0-701 Exam Success by Dr. Jason Edwards. They cover every domain and are a powerful way to lock in your knowledge.